Urban explorers often chase decay like a thrill. They seek out the forgotten places, the ones nature is slowly reclaiming, the ones time seems to have skipped. But sometimes, those places remember being left behind. In the outskirts of Ashwood, Pennsylvania, there's an abandoned radio transmission tower known only to locals as WVT 103.9. Official records say it went off air in 1983 due to financial failure. But those who ventured there claim the equipment still hums. The antenna still glows faintly at night. And deep in the building, tucked behind a sealed hallway, is a room they call the static room. In 2021, a solo explorer who goes by the username Circuit Decay uploaded a now-deleted video showing her journey into the site. She never showed her face, only her flashlight's beam sweeping across dust-covered consoles, empty chairs, and tangled wires that slithered across the floor like roots. Her voice trembled as she spoke softly over the footage, narrating that something felt off the moment she stepped in. She described the air as unusually charged, like walking into a place that had just been struck by lightning. About 20 minutes into her exploration, she finds a sealed metal door. It had no handle, just a panel of warped, reflective glass. Her voice cracks in the footage when she says, "There's something humming behind this, like an old TV left on, but sharper." Then her screen glitches. The frame skips for 2 seconds, and suddenly, she's inside the room. No door opening, no cut, just a jump in time. This static room is coated entirely in aged, soundproof padding, discolored and sagging. In the center sits a single analog console, half lit with dials still moving. All monitors are tuned to white noise, except one. That screen plays grainy footage of her own live camera feed, even though she never aimed it at the screen. She walks in front of the monitor, and the video lags, then loops. She speaks again. "There's no way this is broadcasting. I cut power to my rig before I came in. It's not even online." Her flashlight flickers. Then, in the corner of the footage, just for half a second, a figure appears. A tall, motionless silhouette standing behind her. But she doesn't react. The camera shakes. Her breath quickens. The audio turns distorted. Here's where it gets stranger. In the metadata of the video, viewers later found that the file had timestamps dating back to 1983 to 38 years before it was supposedly recorded. Some theorized it was an elaborate ARG, but those who examined the file say the distortion patterns, the corrupted audio, and even the analog signal emulation couldn't have been artificially added post-process. It was embedded. One user posted a frame-by-frame breakdown, revealing that every 7th frame contained hidden sub-images, faces, broadcasting schedules from decades ago, and weather reports for storms that never happened. One fragment even showed the name Rains, a technician who reportedly vanished on-site during the tower's shutdown in the 80s. Urban legends claim Rains was the last employee in the building when the company folded. His final recorded message to upper management simply said, "There's a transmission that won't stop. I've unplugged everything, but it's still broadcasting from inside." According to declassified emergency response documents from 1983, a fire broke out in the station just a day after Rain's last message. The building was sealed under the guise of asbestos contamination. No one was ever reported missing, but the site was declared a biohazard zone for unexplained radiation pockets, even though no nuclear material was ever stored there. After the video's release, Circuit Decay vanished from all platforms. Her accounts were wiped. Her handle, previously connected to several popular urban exploration forums, became unsearchable. Some believe she scrubbed her identity voluntarily. Others say the broadcast pulled her in. A week after the video dropped, other explorers attempted to revisit the tower. But the static room? It was gone. The hallway that once led to it had collapsed inward, as if it had never existed. One explorer, Marcus Edat, who was among the last to document the structure, shared a photo of the sealed corridor. On the rusted wall, someone had scratched a message into the paint. If you hear the signal, do not answer. This story reveals something deeply unsettling about forgotten places. We think they're just shells of what they once were. But some are still listening, waiting, broadcasting. And sometimes, when you enter them, you're not there to explore. You're there to become part of the transmission. They said it was condemned after a fire in the records wing. But the fire wasn't what drove people out. Not exactly. The Whitlock Asylum had been empty for decades when Darren, a quiet and obsessive urban explorer, found it pinned on an old mental health registry from 1953. It wasn't on any maps. No coordinates, no digital trace, just a name in brittle paper archives. That, of course, made it irresistible. From the outside, Whitlock looked like any other relic of forgotten psychiatric care. Towering brick walls, blacked-out windows, and rusted iron gates too weak to hold back the overgrowth. But beneath it, unmarked on any blueprint, were the tunnels. That's where everything started to go wrong. Darren went in alone, like he always did. He preferred solitude. Silence helped him hear the buildings breathe. His flashlight scanned faded murals in the main ward. Childlike paintings over concrete walls, warped and smeared by time. Down one hallway, he found old beds with leather restraints still intact. But none of that unnerved him. It was only when he reached the sub-level stairs, hidden behind what used to be his staff bathroom, that he began to feel observed. The staircase spiraled down into darkness far longer than it should have. 10 steps, then 20, then 30. Concrete walls narrowed with each turn. When Darren finally reached the bottom, the air was thick with moisture and a strange, metallic scent. The corridor stretched in both directions. No lights, no signs, just doors steel padded sealed. He began filming. His breath echoed louder than his steps. He whispered into the camera for atmosphere, but paused when he heard something layered behind his own voice. A second whisper. At first, it seemed like audio feedback, but the whisper wasn't delayed. It was simultaneous. Repeating him. He stopped speaking. Silence. He whispered again. Something repeated it. Perfectly, 2 seconds later, mimicking his tone, inflection, even the tremble in his voice. He swung his light toward the sound, but the corridor was empty. No breeze. No movement. He pressed forward, passing rusted gurneys and wheelchairs positioned as if someone had just stepped away. And then he found the cell. Unlike the others, its door was ajar. A small metal tag read, B2-11. V. Marrow. The room inside was surprisingly clean. Dustless, almost preserved. A straitjacket lay neatly folded on the bed, and above it, scratched into the ceiling, were the words, "You cannot follow sound in here." Darren stared at it, confused. Was it a warning? A riddle? The walls held hundreds of fingernail scratches, but this message had been etched with something sharper. Deliberate. He backed out, and that's when he noticed something he hadn't heard before. Humming. A low, tuneless hum, barely audible but undeniably real. Not electronic, human. He turned off his flashlight to listen better. The darkness was total, smothering. And in that black void, the hum got louder. Closer. Panicked, he flicked the light back on, but it flickered and dimmed, barely illuminating the space ahead. Something stood at the far end of the corridor. A figure, not moving, not breathing, just there, watching. He stepped back, the beam trembling in his hand. As he moved, so did the humming, except it wasn't fading. It stayed level like the sound was inside his head. Darren ran, but no matter which way he turned, The corridor repeated itself. Door after door, cell after cell, each one marked differently, yet feeling exactly the same. Eventually, he stopped at another open room, this one filled with papers. Patient records. He grabbed a few, desperate for some sense of place. That's when he saw it. A note scrawled on a yellowed intake form. It read, "They keep us here because we hear what no one else does. And we hear you too." The humming returned, stronger now. It was no longer a distant sound. It was inside him, a vibration in his teeth, behind his eyes. The lights went out again, and this time they didn't come back on. His camera kept recording, even in the dark. But something was wrong with the audio. When he played the footage back later, what little he recovered, his voice was gone. Every time he spoke, the whisper had replaced it, speaking in its own tone. Guttural, wet like vocal cords soaked in water. Darren eventually made it out, but he doesn't explore anymore. Not because of what he saw, but because of what followed him. He says the humming never stopped. It starts faint, usually around 3:17 a.m. Always the same pitch, always inside the walls. He's moved 4 times, switched states, burned his gear, but always finds him. And sometimes the whispers answer him before he even speaks. When Sean and Brielle started their small urban exploration channel, they weren't thrill seekers. They were archivists of the forgotten. They focused on the quiet decay of spaces time had left behind. Empty schools, shuttered banks, vacant theaters. It was history to them, not horror. The building in question was a dormant textile mill on the outskirts of Massachusetts. 5 floors, brick facade, boarded windows, standard unassuming. It had been abandoned since the late 70s after a fire in the dying wing forced operations to cease. According to property records and 2 archived blueprints, the mill's layout was straightforward. A ground floor, 4 upper levels, and a rooftop access stairwell. No basement, no substructure, nothing unusual. But on the 3rd floor, tucked behind a crumbling partition that looked more like a rushed renovation than a wall meant to last, they found a staircase that didn't match either of the blueprints they brought. It descended, not ascended. Concrete steps, steep and narrow, with a metal rail spotted with rust. The light from their flashlights seemed to dissolve into the void below rather than illuminate it. But it was Brielle who said what they both were thinking. This staircase wasn't on the plans, right? Sean checked the blueprints again. Nothing. No mention of additional stairwells beyond the main ones. And certainly nothing below ground. That's when something small but chilling clicked in his mind. The fire. The blaze that had shut down the mill had been largely undocumented. One paragraph in an old article citing chemical exposure and significant structural damage. But no photographs, no detailed inspection report, almost like it had been buried. They should have left then. But curiosity, the kind that feels just like dread but hides behind a camera lens, pushed them on. The staircase was unusually cold, more than just the chill of concrete. It felt active, like a pressure. As they moved downward, the ambient sound of the building, the soft groans of settling wood, wind against broken glass, faded, replaced by something else. Breathing, but not theirs. It wasn't rhythmic like a person's. It was wide, encompassing. A room breathing, not a person. Brielle's hand tightened around Sean's jacket. "What is that?" she whispered. They reached a landing. A single hallway stretched in both directions. Every door was marked with faded numbers, single digits, like cells. The air smelled faintly metallic, with the sharpness of a hospital, but the dampness of something left to rot. Brielle filmed in silence while Sean gently pushed open one of the doors. It creaked, of course, and inside was nothing. Just 4 walls, stained with time and something darker. But in the center of the floor was a chair, facing the corner. The The kind of chair that didn't belong in a textile mill. The kind with leather straps on the arms and grooves worn into the floor beneath it. This isn't part of the original building, Sean muttered, stepping back. There were more rooms, more chairs, some with rusted instruments on side tables. Others had scrawled, writing on the walls in faded ink or ash. Words that seemed nonsensical, but repeated themselves like a chant. I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep. By the fifth room, their footage was barely stable. Brielle's hand shook too much, and Sean's voice was no longer calm. They heard something move behind one of the doors. Not the sound of wood settling. Not wind. Movement. Shuffling. Sean whispered her name. They both turned toward the exit, but it wasn't there. The hallway was longer. Much longer. Doorways stretched on endlessly in both directions. A perspective trick that defied how many steps they had taken. There were no turns. No junctions. Just a straight line that now bent just slightly, as if the walls themselves were no longer static. They ran. No time for whispered theories or nervous laughs. But the hallway began to change. The walls grew tighter. The ceiling dipped. The air became thick and hot. Behind them, footsteps began to echo, but not their own. These were heavy, inconsistent, as if something with uneven limbs dragged itself behind them, just far enough that they couldn't see it, but close enough that they didn't dare stop. Brielle screamed as a door slammed shut ahead of them, one they hadn't seen a moment ago. Sean pulled her down a side corridor that shouldn't have been there. It was a gamble, and somehow it paid off. They emerged, abruptly, into the original staircase. The same rusted steps, the same cold rail. Only one flight up, and they were back in the textile mill, gasping, covered in dust, and stained with something that wouldn't wipe off their sleeves. They left immediately. Later, after scrubbing the footage and trying to make sense of what they'd found, Brielle noticed something. In the doorway to one of the rooms, just for a frame, there was a figure. Not standing, not sitting, crouched, just behind the doorframe, watching, wearing something that looked like a sack over its head. Not moving, just watching. Sean froze the frame. It hadn't been there when they were inside the room. They took the footage down, privated the channel for a few weeks. But the nightmares didn't stop. Even now, Brielle says she still dreams of that hallway, that long, bending corridor where time folds in on itself. And always, she wakes up before she reaches the end. The Hotel Calderon had been empty since 1986. Once a glamorous getaway for the elite tucked deep in the Catskill Mountains, it had become a collapsing skeleton of cracked marble, mold-choked carpets, and vines that clawed their way in through shattered windows. Most explorers avoided it, calling it a maze that doesn't want you to leave. But to Derek and Lynn, it was the perfect thrill. They arrived just after noon, armed with a flashlight, a GoPro, and a map copied from an old brochure they'd found online. The lobby was silent. Dust floated in narrow sunbeams that cut through broken stained glass panels, casting distorted colors across the floor. Behind the front desk, room keys still hung in numerical order, untouched by time, except one. Room 313. The key was missing, and the brass hook beneath it was bent upward, like someone had yanked it out in a hurry. They laughed it off. Superstition. Every building like this had its local myths. Ghost brides, cursed floors, staff who'd vanished on the job. Urban legend bait. Derek was already filming as they passed through the ballroom, where velvet curtains sagged like deflated lungs. Lynn paused and muttered something about the air being too still, like everything was holding its breath. The elevator shaft had caved in, so they climbed the stairs. On the third floor, the hallway was colder. Each door they passed had been forced open or kicked off its hinges, until they found one that hadn't. Room 313. It was the only door still intact. Its paint was a deep, unnatural red, not the usual faded hotel beige. Fresh red, glossy. It looked wet. They exchanged a glance. Lynn touched the doorknob. "It's warm," she whispered, confused. Derek pushed the door open, and instantly, the light from a hallway dimmed behind them. Inside, the room was pristine, untouched. The bed was made. The drapes were drawn shut, but warm yellow light leaked from behind them, bathing everything in a sunset glow. It didn't match the decay outside. There was no dust, no cobwebs, no mold, just the soft hum of electricity, though the hotel hadn't had power in decades. The TV in the corner flickered silently. The air smelled like perfume and something older, like formaldehyde. They stepped inside. The door closed behind them. Derek tried to open it again. It wouldn't budge. No lock, no bolt, just resistance, like the frame itself had fused. Lynn pulled harder. Nothing. They were trapped. Then came the noise. A faint creak above them. Then a soft, dragging sound, as if someone was walking barefoot on the ceiling. They froze. Derek whispered that maybe it was rats. Lynn shook her head. Too heavy. The lights flickered. The TV screen turned black, then lit up with a grainy, looping video of the hallway just outside their door. The camera angle was fixed like a security feed, and in the footage, a figure stood still, facing their room. Not moving, not breathing, just standing. Except the hallway outside their door was empty. Derek approached the screen and noticed the timestamp read, May 6th, 2025, 12:03 p.m. That was today. That was now. The figure raised its arm and knocked. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. The real door echoed. They turned, but there was no one there. No shadow under the door. No movement. Derek shouted, asking who was out there. Silence. He turned back to the screen. The figure was closer now. The feed zoomed in slowly, autonomously, until the face filled the screen. Its features were smeared, melting, eyes like hollow pits, mouth open too wide, like a scream trapped in amber. The image cut to static, and then the room changed. The curtains behind the bed yanked open, not by wind, but like unseen hands had grabbed them. What was outside wasn't the overgrown hotel exterior. It was a mirror image of the room, only more decayed. Char walls, broken bed frame, blood smeared across the floor in long drag marks. They weren't looking out a window. They were looking into a copy of their own room in another version of the hotel. A reflection that didn't quite mirror them. In the opposite room, a shadow version of Derek stood with its back turned, its neck bent at a wrong angle. The reflection of Lynn sat frozen on the bed, eyes missing. Then Derek saw something he couldn't explain. His own reflection turned around slowly and grinned. He backed away. Lynn pulled him toward the closet, trying to find another way out. But inside was only an old maid's cart and a coat rack. No vents, no escape. They waited breathless until they heard footsteps outside again. This time, pacing. The air grew thicker. The lights dimmed to a deep amber. And then the voice came, soft, scratchy, like it hadn't spoken in years. "Why'd you come here?" It wasn't outside the door. It was in the room. They turned. No one. Then from the closet, the maid's cart began to rattle, wheels spinning though the floor was level. Something inside shifted. Derek approached, hands shaking, and pulled back the sheet covering it. Nothing. Just old towels and a single room key. Room 312. They looked at each other. That was the room next door. Derek kicked the door again, this time with more desperation. It held, groaning against the frame. Lynn checked her phone. No signal. Battery draining faster than it should. Then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. When they came back on, the TV was showing live footage again. This time, they weren't alone. A third figure now stood behind them in the reflection, motionless, looming. Its head brushed the ceiling. Lynn turned to look. No one was there. But Derek? Derek never turned back again. He just stared into the screen, mouth agape, eyes blank. Then he was gone. No sound, no scream, just absence. Lynn screamed and threw open the door. This time it swung easily. The hallway was back to normal decay. She sprinted to room 312, key clutched in her fist, and barricaded herself inside. It was moldy, foul-smelling, ruined, but it was real. She stayed there until morning, phone finally blinking with signal at sunrise. She left the Calderon without Derek. Search parties never found him. Only his GoPro, melted, warped, and stuck to the floor of room 313. No footage recovered. The red door remains. Still warm, still wet, still waiting. Jackson had explored more forgotten places than he could count. Rusted-out steel mills, long-abandoned hospitals, even the decaying corpse of an old penitentiary. But none of those places stayed with him quite like the tunnels beneath Red Pine Station. Red Pine had been closed since the early 2000s. A minor derailment and a toxic flood from an upstream reservoir had sealed its fate. The city blocked access and posted vague warnings about structural instability, but for urban explorers like Jackson, vague warnings were invitations. He and his friend Levi planned it out for weeks. Their goal wasn't just to walk the abandoned platform. They wanted to get into the disused maintenance tunnels that ran even deeper, sections of the system that were never marked on any official map. The entrance wasn't hard to find. A loose maintenance grate behind a forgotten stairwell led them downward into stale, humid darkness. The deeper they went, the thicker the air grew. Not foul exactly, but still heavy, like the walls were sweating. They walked for half an hour, stepping over broken pipes, corroded tools, and once a mold-eaten pair of boots. At some point, the sound of dripping water grew louder, echoing unnaturally down the corridor. Then they saw the water line. It wasn't recent flooding. This was old, stagnant. The tunnel ahead dipped just slightly, and black water had pooled up to mid-calf level. Levi hesitated. You sure about this? Jackson was. Or, at least, he told himself he was. The moment they stepped into the water, it was like something shifted. The air cooled by at least 10 degrees, and the echoes changed. Each movement produced ripples and splashes that didn't sound quite right. And then the voices started. Faint at first, like murmurs behind a thick wall. Not words, just tonal. Human sounding, but off, like they were underwater. Levi thought it might be sound bouncing through nearby drain shafts, maybe from street-level vents. Logical, scientific, but the voices followed them. Every time they stopped, they'd hear soft sounds just behind them. Never distinct, never threatening, just there. Levi started recording audio. It was a habit of his, more for post-exploration reviews than anything. He liked to match sounds to their sources, trace weird echoes. But Jackson was growing unsettled. There were markings on the walls, chalk and spray paint, but not the kind explorers usually left. No arrows, no usernames, just symbols, circles within circles, lines breaking at odd angles, some smeared like they'd been drawn with wet fingers. After a while, the tunnel opened into a collapsed junction chamber. Most of the ceiling had caved, leaving twisted beams jutting like broken ribs. The floor sloped steeply downward into a sunken cavity half filled with water. That's when they heard the laughter. Not children, not adults, something in between. A strange, reedy sound like someone pretending to laugh, but not understanding how. Levi stopped recording. He looked at Jackson and whispered, "That wasn't you, right?" Jackson shook his head. They decided to turn back, but turning around didn't help. The tunnel wasn't the same. Pipes were in different places. The walls seemed closer. And the symbols, there were more of them now. They were fresher. Vet. Then Jackson's flashlight flickered. Just once. Enough to black out the tunnel for a second. And in that second, he swore he saw something down the corridor. A silhouette. Not a person. Something hunched. Dripping. Its limbs didn't hang right. They walked faster, and the water followed them. At least that's how it felt. Each step behind them seemed louder than the last. Not splashes, thuds. Like something dragging heavy, soaked limbs through the flood. When they reached the grate where they had entered, it wasn't there. The tunnel just continued forward like it had never turned. They kept walking. Hours, maybe. The water got shallower, then deeper again. Sometimes the tunnel rose slightly, only to descend back into black water. Levi's recorder ran out of battery at some point. Then came the whisper, just behind Jackson's ear. "You brought him here." He froze. Levi didn't hear it, but Jackson swore it was real. He didn't recognize the voice. It was hoarse, wet, and angry. The whispers grew louder. They weren't following anymore. They were surrounding. Finally, a door. A metal hatch halfway embedded in a wall, as if it had been swallowed by the concrete. It shouldn't have been there, and it wasn't part of the original infrastructure. Levi reached for it. Jackson stopped him. Something told him not to open that door. Not for any logical reason. Just a deep, paralyzing certainty. Levi didn't listen. The second he touched the handle, the whispers stopped. All at once. Dead silence. Then the water moved. Not rippled, moved. Like something huge passed beneath it fast. The door creaked, swung open slowly, and the smell that poured out was unbearable. Rot, mildew, and something metallic. Blood, maybe. Inside was another tunnel. Shorter, lit by a strange greenish hue that pulsed like a heartbeat. And in the middle of that hallway stood a man. Or what had once been a man. Soaked to the bone. Pale. Eyes black. Mouth open wider than it should have been, as if screaming, but no sound came out. His arms hung loose, joints backward. Levi took one step in. Jackson grabbed him and pulled him back. The figure took one step forward. That was enough. They ran. Blind, desperate, stumbling through water and rust. The voices chased them, but now they were screaming. Layers upon layers of screams. Male, female, old, young. None of them real. At some point, they blacked out. When Jackson woke, he was in an alley 6 blocks from Red Pine. Alone. Muddy, bleeding, and with a high-pitched hum in his ears that wouldn't stop. Levi was never found. His recorder was. The last audio file was just static. Then silence. Then a voice. Jackson's voice. Saying, "I brought him here." Sam was an experienced urban explorer. Not the kind to scream over creaking floorboards or jump at dust falling from the ceiling. He'd walked through old psychiatric hospitals, military bunkers, even a sinkhole-swallowed church. But the place that made him question reality itself was a luxury high-rise that was never completed. The building, dubbed the Glass Hound, was supposed to be a 50-story condominium for the ultra-wealthy, a glittering icon of modern design. Construction abruptly halted in 2009, and what was left behind was a skeleton of its promise: steel ribs, half-installed glass, and a gleaming silver elevator at its core. What caught Sam's attention wasn't just the opulence frozen mid-progress. It was the rumors. The online chatter mentioned strange noises from within the shaft, lights that flickered at night, even though the building had no power. And one claim that stood out: someone had ridden the elevator and never came back. Most explorers avoided elevators like the plague. Too risky, too unpredictable. But when Sam arrived and saw that the call button on the elevator was glowing a soft blue, powered somehow, despite the lack of electricity, he couldn't resist. The lobby was unfinished but spacious. Marble floor tiles stopped halfway through the room. Dust swirled in pale beams of morning light. The elevator doors gleamed like they were just installed yesterday, untouched by time or weather. Curious, Sam pressed the button. The doors slid open instantly. No virainding, no hesitation. Just silence, and that same blue glow inside. He stepped in. Inside the car, there were no floor numbers. Just a single button, a down arrow. Not basement, not B1 or B2. Just down. Now Sam wasn't stupid. He knew when something felt off. But curiosity overrides caution in explorers like him. He pressed the button. The doors closed soundlessly. The elevator began to descend. No hum of machinery. No yolts. Just the sensation of moving. Then he noticed something strange. The elevator had no display to indicate the floor. He checked his phone. No signal, of course. Still, he recorded a quick video, speaking into the camera, describing the descent. Time passed. 1 minute, then 2, then 5. The elevator kept going down. Sam tapped the walls, tried the emergency stop. Nothing responded. There weren't even seams where the panels met. Just smooth metal. That's when he realized there was no sense of depth change in his ears. No pressure difference like you'd feel in a normal elevator. It was as if the concept of distance didn't apply here. And yet, it kept descending. 10 minutes in, the lights inside flickered. Not randomly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Then the lights died. Total darkness. Except for a faint glow outside the glass panel behind him. There hadn't been a window before. He turned slowly. The elevator now had a full-length panel of glass at the rear, showing what looked like a deep concrete shaft, endless in all directions. But as his eyes adjusted, he realized something was off. Shapes moved beyond the glass. Human shapes, pressed against the shaft wall. Not climbing, not falling, just suspended. Dozens of them, eyes open, unblinking. Some had their hands outstretched toward the elevator. Sam backed away, heart pounding. Then, without warning, the elevator jolted to a stop. The doors opened. What lay beyond wasn't a basement or sublevel. It was a hallway, immaculate, sterile, like the kind you'd see in a high-security lab. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The walls were pale gray, smooth and seamless. No signs, no exits, just the hallway. And at the far end, a figure. It looked like a man in a maintenance uniform, standing still, arms at his sides. His head tilted at a sharp angle, like a doll with a loose neck. Sam called out, but the figure didn't respond. Then it twitched. Not moved, twitched, like something inside was learning how to control the body it wore. The elevator doors began to close. Sam lunged, desperate to stay inside. As the doors sealed, the figure turned its head fully toward him, snapping its neck into place with an audible pop. The elevator began to rise. No buttons were pressed. No lights returned. Just a smooth, rising motion. Faster than before. Too fast. The elevator shot upward, and Sam was forced to the floor. The glass panel behind him showed the shaft again, but this time, those human shapes weren't outside. They were in the car with him. Not physically, but their reflections. When he looked directly at the metal walls, nothing. But when he glanced at the glass, reflections appeared. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all standing behind him, staring, motionless. Sam screamed and covered his eyes. When the elevator finally stopped, he was alone again. The doors opened back to the lobby. Same dust, same broken tiles, same silence. He stumbled out, raced back to the street, heart hammering, lungs burning. Outside, it was still morning, the same hour he'd entered. He checked his phone. Still no signal. It would be 2 days before his phone connected to a network again. When it did, the video he'd recorded was gone. Every file from the day of the visit erased. But one photo remained in his gallery. A single blurry image, taken at the moment the elevator doors first opened. It showed Sam standing inside the elevator, with someone behind him. Their hand was on his shoulder. There's a department store in the outskirts of D, a city that's long since stopped pretending to care about its dying downtown. The store's name has been weathered off the facade by sun, rain, and time. Locals call it the Ember Room because it burned once, badly, but never quite finished burning. That was nearly 20 years ago. Since then, it's become a staple among urban explorers. A rite of passage, a guy named Tyler, known online for filming Urbex trips with an old handheld camcorder for aesthetic, went in alone one November evening. No wind, no clouds, just a still gray sky pressing down on everything. He posted a teaser on his channel before disappearing for a month. No uploads, no updates. Then, without warning, the video dropped. It's nearly an hour long. No commentary, just raw footage. It starts with Tyler walking through the busted doors of the department store. His footsteps echo across scorched tile and soot-streaked walls. Everything is blackened, melted, or broken. It's all typical until the 5th floor, the old women's fashion section. That's where the mannequins were. Dozens of them, arranged like they were still part of a showroom. But they were wrong. Some stood on melted heels, some sat twisted on benches. Others posed like they'd been interrupted mid-dance. Almost all of them were charred. Limbs blackened, torsos melted, heads cracked. Yet every single one still had their glass eyes. Untouched, clear, watching. Tyler's camera lingers on them for too long. There's something about the way they're arranged that doesn't feel accidental. Some are turned slightly, as if they'd noticed the camera coming. One mannequin sits in a scorched lounge chair, arms crossed. Its plastic face is intact, smiling faintly. Behind it, shadows stretch where fire once danced along the ceiling. Tyler doesn't speak, but the mic picks up his breathing. It's gotten heavier. Then something small clatters in the background. He whirls the camera around. Nothing. Just ruined shelves and overturned hangers. But when he turns back, the seated mannequin is gone. The video shakes slightly as if he's stepping back. He pans the camera quickly. There, the mannequin now stands near a column at the far end of the floor. Same crossed arms, same smirk, as if it had always been there. Tyler doesn't approach. He just zooms in. It's subtle, but its head is tilted slightly now. The next 5 minutes of footage are silent. Tyler keeps filming as he walks backward through the department. The mannequins seem to shift. He never catches them moving, but their positions subtly change between cuts. A hand once lowered is now raised. A blank stare now turned just a little too far. In the background, there's a soft scraping, like hard plastic across tile. But every time Tyler spins around, there's nothing there. Nothing but the mannequins. One is now directly behind him. It's missing an arm, and its remaining hand is resting on what used to be a checkout counter. Its mouth is open, just slightly, as if trying to speak. Tyler finally whispers, "Okay," just once. Then the screen cuts to black for about 4 seconds. When it returns, the footage has jumped. He's now in the basement, breathing hard. The mannequins are nowhere in sight. There's mold, collapsed racks, and an oppressive silence broken only by water dripping in the distance. The burned store's foundations are colder, almost subterranean, like a tomb. He shines the light on an old service elevator and freezes. Inside are mannequins, all of them, crammed in shoulder to shoulder, facing inward, their backs to the walls, heads bowed slightly toward the center, like they're listening or praying. Their melted forms lean just enough to suggest movement. But there's something more. In the center of the elevator, on the grimy floor, lies an old employee name tag. Tyler. The footage ends with a loud metallic clang and static. For 2 seconds, there's a single frozen frame, a close-up of one of the mannequins. Its face has changed. It's no longer expressionless. It's grinning, and its eyes are real. The comment section beneath the video exploded with theories. Some claim it was a prank. Others say Tyler used CGI. But the most popular theory suggests something darker. The mannequins are not props. They're vessels. An old urban legend tied to the store claims a night security guard disappeared during the fire in 2006. His body was never found. Witnesses said he radioed once, screaming about people in the walls and that the floor models were moving. No one believed him. They thought he was hallucinating from smoke. But his shift log, the last page found in the wreckage, ended with 3 words scribbled in shaking handwriting. They can blink. Tyler hasn't posted since. A few brave viewers try to replicate his route. They confirm the store is real. The mannequins are real. Some found them just as described, charred, cracked, lifeless. But others say the mannequins have changed. There are more of them now, and one of them is sitting in a scorched lounge chair, smiling faintly. It was supposed to be just another empty building, a concrete skeleton at the edge of the industrial district, long condemned after a fire had gutted its north wing nearly a decade ago. To urban explorers, it was a forgotten husk, the kind of place that whispered secrets through cracked drywall and graffiti-smeared silence. Eli and his friend Jordan were seasoned explorers. They'd done drain tunnels, abandoned schools, even a collapsed amusement park. But there was something about the old security company HQ on Kilmer Street that drew them back. It wasn't on maps anymore. The city records said it had been demolished in 2017, but it was still there for stories high and blackened at the corners, like something that didn't want to be remembered. They entered through a broken window behind the loading dock, careful not to disturb the soot-caked glass. The first floor was scorched and twisted. Metal filing cabinets melted like wax, wires dangling like burnt nerves from the ceiling. But the deeper they went, the less fire damage they saw. By the time they reached the basement, it looked almost untouched. That's where they found the surveillance room. Dozens of monitors still mounted to the wall, each covered in a layer of grime. Empty office chairs and dusty coffee mugs sat as if frozen mid-shift. The strangest part? The red power indicator on one of the recorders was still faintly blinking. Jordan flicked on his flashlight and moved closer. The recorder was connected to an old hard drive tower, likely forgotten when the place was abandoned. Somehow, it had backup power, maybe a generator deeper in the building they hadn't seen. Either way, the drive still worked. Jordan pulled a USB cable from his bag and hooked up a portable monitor. Static, then flickers, then video. The timestamp was for November 3rd, 2016, just 2 days before the building supposedly burned. It showed a hallway on the 3rd floor. Desks lined the walls, nameplates still visible. One read client records. There was no movement, no light beyond the emergency bulbs. They fast-forwarded. 2:13 Uhr nachts. A figure appeared. No uniform. No ID badge. The camera flickered as if struggling to process what it was seeing. The figure moved strangely, not like a person walking, but like a projection skipping frames. It didn't seem to walk so much as slide. Then it stopped, turned to look directly into the camera. Though the quality was grainy, its face was wrong, like it had too many features. A collage of expressions that didn't belong together. A jaw that didn't move. Eyes too wide, like they were reflecting light that wasn't there. The footage cut out. Eli and Jordan exchanged a glance. The air in the basement suddenly felt colder. But they were explorers. They chased the unsettling. So they kept watching. Next feed, Camera 7. This one showed a lobby. 3:04 nachts. The figure again. This time, it was standing behind the receptionist's desk, still not moving. The fire alarm light blinked in the background, but no sound played. Then, slowly, the lobby doors began to open, without anyone touching them. Outside, only blackness. Not the parking lot, not the street. Just black. The figure tilted its head. The footage glitched. The screen went dark, then came back with a new angle, camera 12, in the sub-basement hallway. This camera hadn't been labeled. Neither of them remembered passing a door that led deeper than the basement. And yet here it was. Cement hallway, metal door at the far end, fluorescent lights flickering overhead, and in the center of the frame, a man. He was dressed like a security guard. Mustache, ID badge. He looked confused, pacing the hallway like he was looking for something. The figure from before stood at the end of the hallway. Still, the guard didn't see it, or pretended not to. He turned to walk the other way, then froze mid-step. The lights went out. When they came back on, the guard was gone. The hallway was empty. The figure was gone too. In its place, a smear of black across the lens, like something had left residue on the inside of the camera. Jordan leaned back. "This isn't faked. Look at the metadata," he whispered. The timestamps matched. The encoding matched. These weren't spliced in later. Eli, uneasy now, pulled the USB and stuffed it into his bag. They decided to leave. But as they climbed the basement stairs, they noticed something new. The walls, which had been just water-stained concrete before, now bore something else. Scratches. Long, uneven gouges, as though someone had been clawing their way out. Or in. Back outside, the air felt strange. Still, the streetlights had gone out. Their car's interior light blinked erratically when they opened the door. But they said nothing, just got in and drove. That night, Jordan tried to transfer the footage from the USB to his laptop. The files were gone. Not corrupted. Not missing. Gone. The folder labeled cam footage, November 3rd, was completely empty. No matter what he tried, file recovery software, restoring backups, nothing worked. It was as if it had never existed. But the USB wasn't entirely empty. There was one new file, titled simply look_back.mp4. He clicked it. It was grainy video, low resolution, shaky. It showed a person, Jordan, sitting at his desk, watching footage on a laptop. Except he hadn't set up a webcam, and the angle was from behind him, directly behind. As he watched the clip, the door to his bedroom slowly creaked open. The figure from his security footage stood just beyond the threshold, featureless now. Its face had no eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale flesh. It stood perfectly still, waiting. Jordan spun around. Nothing there. But on the screen, the figure had taken a step closer. The video cut to black. The USB drive wouldn't eject. It overheated. Jordan tossed it onto the floor. That night, he didn't sleep. 2 days later, Eli tried calling him. No answer. No texts. When he drove to Jordan's apartment, the building manager said the unit had been vacated. But Jordan's car was still in the lot. The apartment was empty, doors slightly ajar. Inside, everything looked untouched, except the laptop. The screen was cracked, melted slightly at the edges, like it had been exposed to extreme heat. The USB drive was embedded in the side, half fused into the port. But Jordan was gone. Police found no signs of struggle, no signs of exit. He had vanished without a trace. And his name? It never appeared in the lease records, not even in the utility bills. It was as if the building had never housed anyone by that name. Eli never went urban exploring again, but sometimes late at night, when he walks past a dark hallway or glances at a blank monitor, he swears he sees it. That shape. Standing. Waiting. Just behind him. There's something undeniably unsettling about stepping into a morgue. An echo of cold, sterile silence hanging in the air, where life was once lost. But when you're exploring a forgotten hospital, abandoned for years, and the morgue door creaks open with a groan, you expect to find nothing more than old, rusted equipment and rotting paperwork. That's what John thought, too. But what he discovered inside was something that would haunt him forever. John had been into urban exploration for years. The adrenaline rush of discovering forgotten spaces, decaying under the weight of time, was like nothing else. He'd ventured into deserted schools, old prisons, even crumbling hospitals, but none had quite prepared him for this one. This hospital, tucked deep in a forest far outside the city, had been abandoned after a mysterious fire. The rumors were bizarre. Whispers about strange experiments, unmarked graves, and the unexplained disappearance of several patients. Still, John was drawn to it. The building stood alone, eerily tall, with broken windows and an unsettling stillness that seemed to radiate from its very bones. The kind of place that seemed to hide secrets. As he made his way through the hospital's decaying halls, the air grew thick with the musty smell of mold and old medicine. The flickering of his flashlight only accentuated the darkness that pressed in from all sides. When he reached the morgue door, it felt almost too still. The morgue door wasn't like the others in the building. It was solid metal, a heavy, industrial barrier between him and the room beyond. There was no sound from inside, no faint hum of old equipment, no odd noises of rodents scurrying away. Just pure silence. With a deep breath, John pushed the door open. It didn't budge at first, but with a sudden, loud creak, it gave way. The air that rushed out of the morgue was icy cold, colder than the rest of the building. It felt unnatural, like a presence in the room was holding the temperature at that one freezing point. As the door opened wider, he could just make out the faint outline of the room inside. His flashlight's beam danced across the room, revealing metal tables pushed up against the walls, their surfaces cracked and stained. Cold storage units lined one side, their doors slightly ajar as though beckoning him to look inside. A chill ran up his spine. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint what. Then, he noticed the metal door at the back of the room. It was slightly open, a crack wide enough for a single person to slip through, but not enough for someone to get out unnoticed. He approached it, the crunch of his boots on the floor sending an echo into the silence. As he reached for the door, he felt something shift behind him, like the faintest pressure in the air. It was as if someone had entered the room, but when he whipped around, there was no one there. Just the oppressive darkness and the cold walls. John hesitated, but his curiosity got the better of him. He pushed the door open, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Inside, the cold storage unit was unlike the others. It wasn't just a metal drawer. This one was made of something far more solid, a gleaming silver door that seemed out of place in a room so decayed. And, most disturbingly, it was not empty. Lying inside was a body. But not just any body. The figure was perfectly preserved, with the strange, pale skin of someone who had been embalmed, far too fresh for a morgue and hospital that had been abandoned for over a decade. The face was obscured, but it was clear the body had been recently placed there. John's mind raced. It didn't make sense. The place had been abandoned for years. There should be nothing here. As he stood there, staring at the body, something strange happened. The shadows in the room seemed to shift, subtly, at first like something was moving just beyond the edge of his vision. A flicker of movement, perhaps the reflection of his flashlight beam. But when he looked directly at it, the shadows stilled. He took a cautious step forward, drawn to the body, his breath coming faster. Was it possible someone had just left it there? Or was there something darker at play? A flash of unease gripped him, but his feet refused to listen. He reached for the door to the cold storage unit, the cold metal sending a jolt through his hand. It creaked open. The body was now in full view. He took a sharp breath as the face came into view. It was the face of a woman, pale, frozen in a twisted expression of shock. Her eyes were wide, mouth slightly parted. Her skin was a faint shade of blue, but it wasn't the sort of blue you'd expect from someone who had been dead for a long time. It was almost too fresh, too real. Then, something even more disturbing caught his eye. At the base of her neck, faint but visible, was a mark, a small, circular symbol carved into her skin. It was faint, almost invisible under the layers of her skin, but there was no mistaking it. John's stomach churned. This wasn't an ordinary body. This wasn't an ordinary morgue. Something had happened here, something that didn't belong to the rules of time and decay. The shadows shifted again. John's heart skipped. He wasn't alone in the room. He turned quickly, scanning the corners of the morgue, but again, there was no one there. He stepped back, stumbling as he backed away from the cold storage unit. The flashlight in his hand flickered. Suddenly, there was a noise, a faint, dry rustle, a movement from a body. John froze, breath caught in his throat. The woman's hand, pale and lifeless, twitched. Not once, but twice. A soft, chilling gasp escaped her lips, as though she were trying to scream. But the sound was stifled, strangled by the darkness. John didn't wait to see what happened next. He turned, bolting out of the morgue, the door slamming shut behind him. The building was silent once more, but the coldness lingered in the air. The memory of that symbol, of the twitching body, would haunt him for the rest of his life. It had been 2 weeks since Darren and his friends made their first trip to the old school building on the edge of town. The place had been abandoned for over a decade, surrounded by overgrown ivy and rusted gates that no one had dared to pass through in years. Of course, that didn't stop Darren. He was an urban explorer at heart, always seeking new, forgotten places, hoping to capture the hidden beauty in decay. But that school, its crumbling brick walls, shattered windows, and eerie silence, was different. From the moment Darren stepped inside, something felt off. The air inside was heavy, as though the building itself was suffocating. But he didn't let it deter him. He loved the thrill of discovering places others wouldn't dare to venture. The group made their way through the hallways, their footsteps echoing against the peeling wallpaper. It felt like every corner hid a story. Every room felt frozen in time. Old chalkboards covered in dust, broken desks piled high, and posters still clinging to the walls, faded by years of neglect. The further they ventured, the deeper the sense of unease settled over them. They reached the stairwell at the far end of the building. It was blocked off with caution tape, a faint warning of the dangers above. Darren, however, wasn't one to follow rules, especially when there was a hidden part of the school that beckoned him. He ripped the tape away and led the group up the stairs. As they climbed, the air grew colder and the sound of their footsteps became oddly muffled. At the top of the stairs, the second floor hallway stretched out before them, pitch dark except for the weak beam of their flashlights cutting through the gloom. But something wasn't right. It was there, an unsettling noise, faint at first but undeniable. A slow, deliberate sound, like the scraping of shoes against the floor above them. Darren paused, lifting his flashlight higher to scan the ceiling, but it was too dark to make out anything. His friends, standing behind him, didn't speak. They heard it too. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, echoing above them. Darren hesitated, his heart racing. He was a seasoned explorer, but this was different. The ceiling above them, cracked and sagging in places, looked as though it could collapse at any moment. There was no reason anyone should be up there. This part of the school was abandoned, sealed off years ago, and no one had been inside for as long as anyone could remember. Yet, there was again a slow thud, followed by the creak of floorboards. Someone or something was up there. Who's up there? Darren called out, his voice sounding too small in the vast silence. His words seemed to vanish into the air unanswered. One of his friends, Jake, stepped forward, his flashlight flickering. "Maybe it's just the building settling," he suggested, though his voice trembled with doubt. "Doesn't sound like settling," Darren replied, his voice low, the hairs on the back of his neck prickling. "It's too deliberate, almost like someone's walking up there, pacing." They waited, listening intently. The footsteps continued, growing louder with each passing second. It was as if whatever was above them was getting closer. "Let's go," whispered Clara, her eyes wide with fear. This is wrong." But Darren, driven by a mix of curiosity and adrenaline, stepped forward again. "I'm going up there." Before anyone could protest, he started climbing the narrow staircase that led to the attic, his friends reluctantly following behind. With each step, the sound above grew louder, closer, more distinct, until it felt like the footsteps were just on the other side of the ceiling, pacing back and forth. When Darren reached the attic door, he hesitated. The footsteps had stopped, but the air was thick with tension. He pushed the door open. The attic was even darker than the hallway below. The beam from his flashlight barely cut through the pitch-black space. He stepped inside cautiously, the floor creaking underfoot. His friends lingered behind him, hesitant. There was nothing in the attic. No signs of life, no intruders, just piles of old furniture covered in layers of dust and sheets. The beams of the roof above looked worn and frail, as though they could give way at any moment. Yet the feeling of being watched hung in the air, thick and suffocating. And then it came again, a loud, unmistakable thud. Right behind him, Darren spun around, his heart pounding in his chest. His flashlight swept across the room, illuminating nothing but shadows. There was no one there. The footsteps were still there, but they weren't coming from above, they were coming from behind. The floor creaked once more, followed by another deliberate step. This time, it sounded like someone was walking behind him, just out of sight, hidden in the darkness. "Darren," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "We need to go. Now." But Darren was frozen, unable to move. The air felt impossibly thick, suffocating him. The footsteps grew louder, closer, but no one was there. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the sound stopped. The silence was deafening. Darren slowly turned around, his flashlight trembling in his hand. He scanned the attic, searching for anything, any sign of movement, of life. But it was all still, too still. His heart was in his throat now. He could feel the weight of something pressing down on him, something unseen, something watching him. Then the door to the attic slammed shut behind him. The room was plunged into total darkness. The footsteps resumed, but now they were all around him, behind him, in front of him, echoing from every corner of the room. Darren's breath caught in his throat, panic rising in his chest. He stumbled backward, fumbling for the door, but it was locked. The footsteps were closing in. Something moved in the darkness. A cold breath brushed against his ear. It's a well-known fact in the world of urban exploration that time doesn't move the same way in abandoned places. The air is thick with stillness, and the weight of forgotten history hangs heavy. But in an old, forgotten factory on the edge of town, time does something stranger, something far more unsettling. When Owen and his friends first found the old factory on the outskirts of the city, it seemed like just another run-of-the-mill urban exploration trip. They'd been inside countless abandoned buildings, from crumbling hospitals to long-forgotten schools, and never had they been afraid. But there was something different about this one, something that didn't sit right. The factory had been closed for decades. As Owen and his friends stepped inside, the scent of mold and rusted metal greeted them. But it wasn't just the decay that caught their attention. It was the silence. Not the eerie, deathly quiet that accompanies most abandoned places, but the silence that seemed expectant, like something was waiting. They wandered through the factory, the air thick with dust motes dancing in the weak light, filtering through broken windows. Old machinery stood abandoned, covered in a layer of grime and cobwebs. But what truly caught Owen's eye was something he had seen in almost every old building: a large, grand clock on the wall. But this one was different. It was a tall, vintage grandfather clock, positioned at the far end of the factory floor, its face cracked, but still unmistakably regal. But what made it even stranger was that it was ticking. Owen approached it cautiously, his friends trailing behind him. The tick-tock echoed through the empty factory like a heartbeat, out of place in the otherwise silent surroundings. He checked his watch. 12:03 a.m. The clock on the wall was nearly 12 hours behind. Who the hell wins this thing? Owen muttered under his breath. His friend Sarah, always the skeptic, chuckled. Maybe someone's messing with us. It's probably just a broken clock that somehow keeps ticking. But the more they listened, the more they realized the clock wasn't just ticking. It was ticking in perfect rhythm, a deliberate, unervingly consistent beat. Owen leaned in closer, studying the clock. The hands were frozen in place at midnight, yet the ticking continued unabated. He reached out to touch it, his fingers brushing the cold glass of the clock face. Something in the air shifted, and for a brief moment, the room seemed to grow colder. A shiver ran down his spine. Okay, that's just weird, Owen said, stepping back. But his curiosity got the best of him. He stepped closer once more and tried to turn the hands of the clock to see if he could reset it. But as soon as his fingers made contact with the hands, the ticking stopped. Just like that, the room fell silent. Sarah, who had been watching from a distance, raised an eyebrow. What the hell did you do? Owen pulled his hand back, the room still. It felt wrong, almost unnatural. The factory seemed to grow quieter, the air thicker. Then, just as suddenly as it had stopped, the ticking began again, but this time it was different. It was slower and louder. With every second, the tick-tock seemed to reverberate deeper into the building, as if it was coming from everywhere at once. Owen's friends exchanged uneasy glances, but Sarah, always the one to brush things off, said, maybe it's just the old mechanics. You know, something's misfiring inside. But Owen could sense it now. It wasn't the machinery. There was something more to it. A presence. Something alive in the walls of this place. They turned to leave, but before they could take a single step, they heard it. The faintest sound, a whisper coming from the shadows behind them. Don't leave. Owen spun around, but there was nothing there. The room was as empty as it had been when they entered. His heart raced, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching them. He glanced at the clock once more, and that's when he saw it. The hand were moving again, slowly but moving. First, they inched forward, then faster. The minute hand passed 12, then 2, then 4, ticking away as if trying to catch up with time. But it wasn't just the clock. The shadows in the corners of the factory seemed to stretch toward them, drawing closer. Okay, that's enough. We're leaving, Owen said, his voice tight. He motioned for his friends to follow him, but as they turned to go, the clock's ticking grew louder. Uncomfortably loud. It felt like it was coming from inside their heads now, pressing in on them, suffocating them. They reached the door, but when they tried to open it, the handle wouldn't turn. The factory was locking them in. It was as if the building itself had decided they weren't leaving. They tried to force the door open, but the tick-tock only grew louder, more insistent. The shadows were all around them now, and the air was thick with an unnameable dread. Owen could barely breathe. His eyes were glued to the clock, which was now ticking faster and faster, the hands spinning wildly, blurring into a frenzy of motion. He could feel the weight of it on his chest, suffocating him. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the clock stopped. The hands froze. The room went deathly silent again, the only sound the rapid pounding of their hearts. The door swung open on its own. Without a word, they bolted from the factory, not stopping until they were safely back at their cars. But as Owen glanced back at the factory, the faint ticking sound lingered in his mind, a reminder that something there was far from finished. Even now, Owen isn't sure what happened that night. Some say the clock was simply an old, malfunctioning piece of machinery. Others believe it's something more, something that has been waiting for the right moment to trap those who wander too close. And for those brave or foolish enough to venture inside, time may never truly be on their side. It was a late autumn afternoon when Sarah and her friends, Mark and Julie, set off on their latest urban exploration adventure. The trio had explored everything from abandoned factories to forgotten amusement parks, but this was something different. This time, the building they were exploring was an old, once luxurious mansion. Now a hollow shell, its grandeur reduced to nothing more than peeling wallpaper and rotting floorboards. The mansion had stood for over a century, its origins shrouded in mystery. Most of the rumors revolved around the enigmatic family who had once lived there, the wealthy and reclusive Hollingsworths. But despite the mansion's haunted reputation, it had long been forgotten by the city, the stories of its occupants buried in time. The friends made their way through the darkened hallways, their flashlights flickering against the walls as they passed. The air was thick with the musty scent of decay, and the creaking of floorboards beneath their feet echoed in the empty rooms. They had already explored the basement, the attic, and the upper floors, all of which seemed unremarkable except for the odd feeling that lingered in the air. It wasn't fear. It was something more subtle, something that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up and their footsteps falter. Julie was the first to spot it. A large, ornate mirror hanging on the wall of a room they hadn't yet entered. It was out of place, its intricate golden frame gleaming despite the layers of dust and grime. It was almost as though it had been left untouched by time, a perfect anomaly in the decaying house. "Look at that," Julie whispered, her voice tinged with curiosity. "That mirror's got to be ancient." Mark was quick to agree, stepping closer to inspect it. "It doesn't fit with the rest of the house, does it?" he said, his flashlight beam tracing the edges of the mirror. "Everything else is falling apart, but this thing, it looks brand new." Sarah stepped forward, brushing the dust from the glass. The surface of the mirror gleamed back at her with an almost unnatural clarity. She wasn't sure why, but something about it fell off. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but it made her uneasy. "Don't touch it," Sarah muttered, half joking. "It might be cursed." Mark laughed and stepped even closer. "Cursed? We're in a haunted mansion. Sarah, everything here is cursed." He reached up and placed his hand on the frame, pressing against it. That's when they all heard it, the soft, almost imperceptible click. Sarah froze. Mark pulled his hand back, looking around nervously. "Did you hear that?" Julie asked, her voice quieter now. Sarah nodded slowly. "Yeah, but I don't see anything." Mark was already trying to push the mirror, half expecting it to fall off the wall. But to his surprise, it didn't budge. He pushed harder, and that's when he felt it, a subtle shift. The mirror moved inward, as if on hinges. The frame was only an illusion, hiding something behind it. With a shudder, Mark leaned his body against the mirror, feeling a hollow space open up behind it. "Guys, I think we found something." The mirror creaked loudly as it swung open, revealing a hidden doorway, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. The dark, narrow passage behind the mirror seemed to stretch far beyond their flashlight's reach. an oppressive darkness that made Sarah's pulse quicken. "What is this?" Julie whispered, eyes wide. "Is this part of the house?" "I don't think so," Mark said, his voice hushed. "This looks like it was hidden on purpose." Without another word, Sarah stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure why, but the curiosity was too strong. The door was almost calling her, pulling her in, urging her to discover what lay beyond it. They all stepped inside, the air growing colder as they moved deeper into the passage. The walls seemed to close in on them as they walked, the faint scent of mildew growing stronger with each step. The darkness around them pressed in, and Sarah's breath became shallow as they continued down the winding corridor. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached the end of the passage. At first, Sarah thought it was just another empty room, but then she saw it. The walls of the room were lined with bookshelves, filled with ancient-looking tomes. The air was thick with the smell of old paper, and the dim light of their flashlights cast long, eerie shadows across the room. But that wasn't what caught Sarah's attention. It was the large wooden door at the far end of the room, its surface covered in intricate carvings. The carvings depicted strange, almost grotesque images, figures twisted in unnatural poses, their faces frozen in agony. Without thinking, Sarah reached for the door, her hand trembling as she touched the cold wood. The door creaked open, revealing a room shrouded in darkness. It was unlike any room they had encountered before, an eerie, otherworldly place that didn't belong in this mansion. Inside, the walls were covered in mirrors. Some were large, like the one in the hallway, while others were small, like shards of glass. They reflected an unsettling image, one that didn't match what they saw in the real world. In every reflection, they could see themselves, but distorted, twisted versions of themselves. Their faces were pale and hollow, their eyes dark and soulless. They didn't look like the people they knew. Julie's breath caught in her throat as she backed away from the mirrors, her eyes darting around the room. What is this place?" "I don't know," Mark said, his voice barely a whisper. "But I think we need to leave. Now." But as they turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang, trapping them inside. The room seemed to close in on them, the mirrors growing larger, their reflections growing more distorted with every passing second. Sarah's heart raced as she desperately tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the mirrors were pulling them in, trapping them in a never-ending maze of reflections. "Something's not right," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible as she stared into the nearest mirror. "We need to get out. Now." But it was too late. The mirrors seemed to stretch forward, swallowing them whole. And as they vanished into the reflections, their screams echoed through the room, forever trapped in the glass. It was supposed to be just another urban exploration. For Alex, the thrill of entering an untouched building, an abandoned structure, had become a ritual. He wasn't a rookie. He'd explored everything from forgotten warehouses to crumbling hospitals. But this place, a massive, deteriorating mansion on the outskirts of town, was different. The rumors had been floating around for months. No one had dared to explore it, not in recent years. And the few who had, well, they didn't exactly come back the same. Some didn't come back at all. Alex didn't believe in ghost stories. Not really. He knew that half of them were just urban myths, exaggerated tales to make an old building seem haunted. He was used to hearing the whispers. The mansion had been a family estate, but after the mysterious death of the last owner decades ago, the place had been left to rot. People said it was cursed. They said the spirits of the family never left. But Alex was drawn to the stories. The darker the legend, the more he needed to know. On that foggy afternoon, He made his way to the estate. The mansion loomed ahead, its towering windows like dark, hollow eyes watching him. The air was thick with the smell of moss and decay, but Alex couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement. The exploration would be straightforward. He had his flashlight, his gear, and his camera to document it all. The door creaked as he pushed it open, stepping into the dark, musty hallway. Dust particles floated in the air, and the floors groaned underfoot. It was a maze inside, with rooms that had been left half-finished, as if the mansion's occupants had suddenly vanished. Alex moved deeper, his flashlight beam dancing across crumbling walls, peeling wallpaper, and forgotten furniture. As he explored the mansion, he stumbled upon what seemed to be a library. Bookshelves lined the walls, though most of the books had been long destroyed by time and water damage. There, hidden beneath an old tarp, was a large, intricately carved door. It seemed out of place, almost too perfect amid the decay. It wasn't like the other doors he had seen in the mansion. This one was solid, ornate, and remarkably well preserved. His curiosity piqued. Alex couldn't resist. He pushed it open. Beyond the door, a narrow staircase descended into darkness. The air felt heavier now, thicker, colder. Alex hesitated, but only for a moment. His instinct to explore the unknown kicked in. He descended slowly, each step echoing through the silence. The further he went, the colder it became, and the air seemed to press down on him, thick and suffocating. At the bottom, the stairs opened up into what appeared to be a massive underground chamber. The walls were lined with mirrors, reflecting back at him in a dizzying array of angles. But something was off about the reflections. They didn't seem quite right. His own reflection seemed distorted. His movements were slightly delayed, as if he were watching himself through a window rather than a mirror. Alex's heart began to race, and a deep unease settled over him. He tried to shake off the feeling, focusing instead on the eerie beauty of the chamber. The mirrors were set in odd, almost unnatural patterns, creating a maze of reflections. But as he walked deeper into the room, something caught his eye in one of the mirrors. It wasn't his reflection. For a brief moment, he saw a figure, a woman standing still in the corner of the room. Her face was hidden in shadows, but her posture was stiff and unnerving. Alex froze, his breath caught in his throat. He turned quickly, expecting to see someone standing behind him, but there was nothing. The room was empty, save for the mirrors and the haunting silence. Alex's mind raced. Had he just imagined it? He turned back to the mirror, heart pounding. The figure was gone, but the air felt thicker now, colder, as if something had shifted. It wasn't just the atmosphere, it was the sense of being watched. He had to get out, but as he turned to leave, the door he had entered through slammed shut, cutting off the only way back. He rushed to the door, yanking on the handle. Locked. Panic surged through him. He stepped back, looking around the room for another exit, but found none. The mirrors, once curiosities, now felt like prison bars, trapping him in their endless reflections. The silence was suffocating, and for a moment, Alex wondered if he was losing his mind. Then he heard it, a faint sound, distant but clear, like a whisper coming from one of the mirrors. He turned quickly, his flashlight shaking in his hand. The whisper grew louder, then louder still, until it was a full-blown voice, a harsh, rasping breath that seemed to be speaking right into his ear. "You shouldn't have come here." Alex spun around, scanning the room. The voice was everywhere, inside his head, vibrating through his bones. His mind raced. This isn't real. This can't be real. But it was. The mirrors now reflected not just his movements, but everything around him. His every breath, his every blink. But there was something more. In the reflections, There were figures, dozens of them, standing just out of reach, their faces obscured, their eyes fixed on him. Alex felt his chest tighten. He was trapped in a room full of watchers, all waiting, all still. One of the figures in the mirror moved closer, its form growing clearer. It was the woman he had seen earlier, her face now fully visible, pale and lifeless. Her eyes locked onto his, and the room seemed to grow colder still. Her lips parted, and the voice came again. "You never leave." A rush of terror shot through Alex. His hand shot to his flashlight, flicking it on again, but it sputtered and died. His heart pounded in his ears, and his breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. "I have to get out. I have to get out now." Frantically, he turned, searching for anything, any way out. But the mirrors seemed to be closing in, the room shrinking. He backed away slowly, his hands shaking as he reached for the door, but it was still locked. The voices grew louder, until they drowned out everything else, until they were the only thing he could hear, the only thing he could feel. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The silence was deafening. Alex fell to his knees, exhausted and trembling. He glanced around one last time, searching for any sign of escape. The mirrors had returned to their stillness, their reflections unchanged. And the figure, the woman, was gone. But as he stood, wiping his brow, he realized with a sudden, sickening dread that he had never heard the door unlock. And then, for the first time, Alex realized something terrifying. He was no longer sure if he was still in the mansion. The reflection that stared back at him was not his own.